So we've finally made it to the podcast.
Yeah, it's good to be here.
Yeah, man.
I'm looking forward to the next couple of hours of discussion.
Yeah, no, it should be good, man. It should be good. I think we've always had conversations like over the phone.
Yeah.
Half an hour conversations, an hour conversations about sales, business, and just doing like loads of amazing things. And I think it's finally good that we're here to speak about these things and share that with with people that are watching. Across,
absolutely.
Yeah, it's good, man.
Yeah, no, it's good to put some of those ideas that we've spoken about over the last 10 years into practice and share some words of wisdom, I think.
That's it, definitely. So do you want to introduce yourself, my bro? Then I'll do the same.
Yeah, sure. So my name's JJ. People refer to me as JJ. Currently working as a enterprise sales manager for a B2B startup. And yeah, that's just a little about me.
Yeah, beautiful. And my name is DeGraft. A lot of people call me Nana. So I actually work in sales as well, but I work in a different type of sales. To Jay, I work in more pharmaceutical sales. And across the 10 years I've been working in pharma sales, I've worked for some of the biggest companies out there in pharma. So yeah, it's good that we have kind of two very different disciplines, and kind of we've come together to kind of showcase
Two
what's
different
basically
perspectives.
possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think a lot, there's a lot of similarities in general with sales across the board. And I think it'll be interesting for people to get that different perspective from a software perspective from myself, and then of course the pharma perspective from you. So
yeah,
hopefully we can share some words of wisdom.
Yeah, 100%. So I'm thinking, do we start from where we came from before we go into sales, or do we start from where we are now and then work our way back? What feels more natural to you?
I always like to start from the beginning. Take 10 years ago, kind of what got us into, what actually got us into sales, right? Because I think at university, the career trajectory at the time was completely different.
Okay.
I was obviously doing economics and politics, at university. And I think for me anyway, the big driver was seeing the earning potential that sales could bring. Yeah, I think definitely start at the beginning.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so you did obviously you did business. Which uni did you go to?
Yeah, so I went to Kingston University.
Kingston, of course. Kingston.
Oceana. I spent a lot of time in Oceana.
Of course.
So I went to, funnily enough, so I did business in at college, and then pivoted into economics and politics.
Yeah.
At uni, spent a lot of time, throughout the year trying to figure out what's the direction I wanted to. I think I figured out very quickly that the political game wasn't where I wanted to go into.
Sure.
Fortunately, at the time, I had friends and family that worked in sales, so it was very glaringly obvious to see the potential from the kind of the corporate sales world. How about you? What was your humble beginnings?
Humble beginnings.
Yeah.
So my humble beginnings. So I actually came to this country when I was like 9 years old. Fresh from Ghana. Fresh to this country when I was 9 years old. And I think when I first came here, I was more into like art and stuff like that. But African parents, you're either three things. You know what those things are: doctor, engineer, lawyer, right? So I think because of that, I also love science, by the way. And I think I have a quite an interesting story about science, because when I first came here, I was in the bottom set for everything. Like in school, I was in the bottom set for everything. They slapped me.
What's the bottom set?
Okay, so in school, you have like set 1, set 2, set 3, set 4, set 5.
I was at set 1, so I did. I was at the top. I did. No wonder I didn't know about the bottom
set. Basically, we didn't exist to you guys. So I was basically in the bottom set for everything.
Why do they put you in the bottom set?
Because you have to do this thing called a CAT test.
Oh, okay.
It's basically like a psychometric test to test basically how intelligent you are.
Okay.
Now, if you think about it, it's so silly.
Yeah.
Because some people are generally better at doing those tests than other people.
Yeah.
So we did those tests, And then after doing those tests, you'd basically be judged whether or not you're meant for a specific set or not.
And what was the test, just out of interest?
Just basically fit this triangle into the circle. Calculate this math test. Just nonsense.
Yeah.
Basically.
The thing is, I know exactly what you mean, because I'm very good at
stuff like that.
I'm very good at performing based on how I know the test wants you to perform.
Okay.
Versus actually knowing, I'm very good at seeing the test.
Yeah.
Figuring out what I need to do to pass the test and look really good, versus actually knowing
what to do.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's what exams are all about.
Yeah.
Right? Exams are very good at judging certain aspects of certain people.
Yeah.
So you might be very good, but then like you know how to beat the system, right? So you beat the system every time. But me, I've never done a test like that in Ghana when I was growing up. So when I did these tests, obviously, like I didn't do very well.
Yeah.
So they put me in bottom set for everything.
Yeah.
But I knew I was very good at science, right? And when I hit year 9, they tried to put me in the bottom set again for science. So so basically there was one day I must have walked into set 1 by accident. I walked into set 1 by accident. Yeah. Everyone said, "Why were you here? This is not your class." Like, trying to laugh me out, right?
Yeah.
But I had a really good science teacher. Because they did that, he was like, "No, sit down." Basically, like you're not going anywhere. So since then, I was in top 1
of the set.
Yeah.
So that's how you sneak.
That's how I got into.
That's how you sneak yourself into set 1. No, that's interesting. And how did the what was your kind of light bulb experience moment for I want to go to, because obviously you've got the science element, which is great.
Yeah.
How did you kind of combine that to?
Yeah.
How did you put that together with sales and?
No, that's a good question, because I did well in science, obviously. Obviously I got like good grades in science from GCSE, from being in set 1. Went to uni to do biomedical science. And from biomedical science, I kind of realized that, look, the world is changing. Yes, medicine is what everyone expects you to do, but I didn't want to get into medicine.
Yeah.
I saw that I was very good at presenting, showcasing, and and delivering clinical trials. So I kind of looked into what I could get into that kind of leverages those skills. And funny enough, I also had a friend who the year before, so basically he left a year before me.
Yeah.
When I was in, let's say, second year of uni. So he just finished uni. And then I saw that he was doing, pharma sales or medical device sales. And I thought, man, this looks so good. And he was bragging about how much he's making.
Yeah.
I thought, I have to get into this. So as soon as I left uni, got some sales experience and straight into it. Yeah.
Nice.
What about you, man?
Yeah, I think our stories are quite similar in that sense. Because I think we were, we're both at university, doing a course, and very quickly realized that we wanted to, take what we learned, but kind of go into that kind of sales world. And I think it's interesting because you've worked for very big, global companies, and I've gone the other direction and worked for kind of smaller startups. So I think that perspective as well would be quite interesting for I think people to learn and understand. Cool, man. So what's the first proper topic?
Yeah, so the first proper topic is basically talking about what's happening right now in terms of the world. Obviously, we're going through a crippling crisis in terms of living when it comes to the UK, especially.
Yeah.
And I think, you're someone that I've always seen that you've done kind of very well at a young age, basically.
Yeah.
I mean, you bought your first house at what, 24?
24, yeah.
You bought your first car?
25.
25. What was your first car, JJ?
It was a Porsche Cayman.
A Porsche Cayman.
Yes.
Guys, you bought his first car was a Porsche Cayman, right?
Yeah.
And this was what, at 24 as well?
25 car at, yeah. Porsche Cayman at 25, yeah.
Obviously. And he did all this, still remaining humble somewhat.
When the filming stops, the arrogance kicks in. No.
But to be honest, like, you've done very well for yourself as a person. I've always admired that about you. And I think you were able to do that through selling.
Yeah.
And I think it was important for us to kind of, reflect back from where we came from, because we're no different to anyone else that's out there.
Absolutely.
You know.
And I think that's the beauty. Sorry to cut you there. I think the good thing about us is, I wouldn't necessarily say we're overly gifted. I think we as our backgrounds are very similar. Wasn't always the smartest person in the room, and we've been able to kind of take the stuff that we've learned, apply it, and be able to kind of slowly but surely progress over through the corporate ladder. So I think if we can do it, and if you can definitely do it
from set 5, guys.
From set 5, then I think anyone can do it.
There you go.
And I think that's the mindset to have. I think with there's a couple of basic foundations I think any good seller needs to have, but I think overall it's kind of learning from mistakes, learning from others, and kind of taking that and moving forward. But
that's it.
I can also blow some smoke your way. I think you've obviously been very, very successful. You've been doing this for 10 years, over 10 years. A lot of good material things that you've been able to purchase. I think you've got the nicest house of all of our friendship groups. So I think boast your ego as well. So I think it's a huge opportunity. I think for people. I think we look at the current living situation, as you mentioned, as a topic, and I think there's a lot of harsh realities that face the average person.
100%.
The needing multiple salaries to buy a house. I think the pension age for people above 25, I think is 70 years. I don't know about you, but not looking to work till that ripe age.
Literally.
Income from salaries is growing at a slower pace than inflation. So your actual purchasing power is reducing year on year. And those were some harsh truths that I think
100%.
Would scare anyone. And I think hopefully we can kind of share the opportunity of going into sales and being successful.
Yeah, and I think what you said is completely right. And before we kind of touch on to sales, I think I want to touch on one topic, because I think we live in this kind of social media microwave economy where everyone wants to be successful before they can run, right? And there's this whole stigma that 9 to 5s are no longer good, or everyone needs to be an entrepreneur. And that's the only way you can be successful, buy a house and do all these things. But, looking at someone like yourself, obviously you've managed to do all these things without yet starting a business. Obviously you're still going to start a business, but your foundations kind of started from a 9 to 5. So I kind of want us to have a bit of a conversation around that, because, personally, I believe that 9 to 5s are where it begins from. Even before you start a business, you can learn how to manage a company and all these things by leveraging what you learn from companies that you work in, especially. And no company can work without sales. And if you can really leverage the experience of selling, I feel like that not only can it pay for your foundations, like cost of living, where you live, the car you drive, kind of looking after your family, your immediate and your external family, but also it can put you in a position where you learn valuable skills that you can now transfer into the marketplace.
Share that.
Valuable.
Share the what's your favorite quote that you have around?
What's that?
Everything is sales. You're
either selling.
Yes,
or
that's
being
it.
sold to.
Exactly. I love that, and I think that holds true. You're either being sold or you're.
I think I read that from Grant Cardone's book.
Yeah. Okay.
Sell or be sold.
Yeah.
And it's the whole concept of, look, this conversation we're selling right now, right? Even though it doesn't look like we're overtly selling, what we're selling is our ideas. Anytime you have a conversation with someone, you're simply selling an idea to that person.
Absolutely.
So I feel like even children, right? Children are the best salespeople. What does the children do when he wants something, right? It
cries.
Like he cries or she cries. And the mother's like, oh yeah, there you go. So I think we're all naturally born to sell. The thing that we need to learn, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is closing. So I think closing requires a bit more meticulous skill. But yeah, we're all selling at all times, so why not get paid for it? Right?
Exactly.
Which is what we're kind of talking about.
Yeah, exactly. I completely, and I really like that quote. You know, you're either selling or being sold to, and you know, every opportunity you're positioning ideas, even the things that, you know, the conversation that we're having now, the knowledge that we're sharing, that's our view on sales.
Exactly.
You know, other sellers might have a completely different view. They're probably wrong, but they can they can definitely offer up that kind of viewpoint. And I think it's you know, there's some foundations and, you know, you need to own, like, you know, discipline, you know, being able to understand what drives people, how they think, the decisions they make. And I think that's, you know, these are all skills that can take you throughout life.
100%.
And it all came from your point from initial 9 to 5. And I think it's just being able to, you know, a 9 to 5 that doesn't have that kind of growth trajectory, that could be quite miserable. But I think with sales in particular, you know, you really do start off at the bottom. And you know, I've seen salespeople come in as, you know, an SDR, which we'll talk about more, right, and go to be a, you know, CEO of a you know, $100 million company, because effectively they've got the ground and the skills to get to that point. So yeah, looking forward to sharing. You know, we can definitely share some more about that.
Definitely.
And yeah, I think it's a tough time for many. And I think, you know, if we can share some stuff that will make people's situation a bit better, I'm happy to.
I'm more game for it. Yeah. So I do think that I think selling can be an excellent route, especially for young people. I'm not saying this for everyone.
Yeah.
But I think it can be an excellent route to earn a high income at a very young age, right?
Absolutely.
Because, yeah, I mean, can you kind of explain how the sales structure works, or the kind of the bonus and the payment structure works within tech sales, for example?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so obviously, you have a base pay, effectively, that you'd have with any kind of career that you go into, and then we have what we call kind of a commission on target earnings, which is effectively an additional set of money that can be made based on, you know, your ability to hit target or not hit target. So it's typically that structure with most software companies, and it's uncapped as well, which is, even if when you hit your target, you get that additional set of money. But then if you go way beyond your target, you can still earn tons of commission at a faster rate. And I think that's the big opportunity for most people. It's, you know, when you go into sales, you just don't want to sit on your base. A lot of the time it can be comfortable, but if you want to, you know, with the amount of effort and work that you put in, you want to definitely be getting to your on target earnings, commissions, and going past that. So that's kind of the structure that I've seen from all kind of B2B companies, and yours is a little bit different, right? Is it?
Yeah, so it's kind of similar.
Similar, okay.
Yeah, similar. Obviously, from kind of working in biotech companies, depending on what you're selling, it's quite similar. I think let's describe what we actually do first, and then we can get into how it works.
Probably should
have
started there.
Yeah, we probably should have started there, right? Guys, we're still new to podcasting, so bear with us. So I'll go first. So biotech sales, which is what I do, kind of comprises of everything to do with medical equipment, pharmaceutical drugs, and anything like that. From that perspective. And basically we have customers that we basically also have to sell to. So if you take, let's say, a medical device, like, I don't know, something like a surgical device that someone might use in surgery, you know, the doctors need to know about that, right? To be able to utilize that equipment for the patients. And that equipment is actually produced by a company. So those companies need representatives to be able to go out there and speak, have conversations with those clinicians, and be able to kind of, you know, foster a conversation that leads to that hospital buying that device to be able to use for their patients. So I'm basically the middle guy, or the middle person between that pharmaceutical company or the medical company or whatever it is, and that customer that requires that device, basically.
Do you always find that there's an ethical? I always find your game interesting because there's almost a bit of an ethical balance between. Because naturally in sales you want to make a lot of money.
Sure.
And you're in an interesting part of sales because you're actually helping people through healthcare effectively. And it's always an interesting balance between I want to make a lot of money but versus I want to actually help people. I don't know if you ever have that conundrum of what's more important, right? Providing that service or just I don't know, overselling because you want to hit target.
I think in what I do is it's not as salesy. It's very consultative. You're almost like a consultant.
Yeah.
The idea is not to push this product onto anybody. Especially when I use the surgical device, for example, is generally kind of uncovering the need of the customer. Making sure that this need is something that is really required. If it's not required, you just simply back off. But 9 times out of 10, a doctor's going to need some type of surgical tool to perform his duties. So it's all about kind of picking the right company that's producing the ethical products that is required in the market and being the person to be able to deliver that to the market. So I think once all those things line up, it becomes very easy. You kind of don't think about the money, you think about what needs to be done, and the money will surely follow.
Absolutely.
That makes sense.
And I think that's exactly the mindset you got to have in to be any kind of top performing salesperson. Because I think a lot of the time people just want to, what's the horrible expression, kind of flog stuff, which is effectively sell. But in reality, as you know, you've got to have this consultative approach.
Sure.
You got to understand their needs, what they want,
exactly,
and position yourself accordingly based on that. And you're right. Sometimes there isn't a good fit, and rather than try and force it, it's better to walk away from those situations and not force something just because you want to sell. And you got to have a vision with sales. You got to have a long-term play. And I think it's interesting, right? Because it is almost like managing a business, right? You've got 100%. You got customers. You have you're trying to win new opportunities. You spend a lot of time reading contracts. It's kind of managing that entire life cycle structure. And I think those are the skills that have helped us actually get to where we are. And we got a lot of exciting business like things that are in the pipeline. And I know that the foundations of what we've learned over the last 10 years, I think that's gonna really help.
Definitely. Yeah. So I've actually tech sales is actually quite interesting because when I first started working straight after university, I actually worked for a company that kind of deals with it was an SDR company. So I was effectively an SDR, which stands for
sales development rep.
Yeah, exactly. So
some places, as you know, some places call it BDR. I've heard inside sales.
Exactly.
What other interesting wacky ones have I heard? I think SDR is probably the most commonly used.
Standard, But I think that's kind of the starting point when it comes to tech sales. I kind of went into a different route and went more into biotech sales. But yeah, as an SDR, I found that quite interesting, selling to kind of tech companies and so on and so forth. Could you kind of describe what tech sales is?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, hats off to every single SDR out there, and anyone that's anyone wants to start off as SDR. I think that's probably the most humbling position or job that I've seen within the kind of the corporate infrastructure. And effectively those guys are they're the feet on the street. They're ultimately creating opportunities for account executives like us to have an opportunity to actually sell, right? Because we spend so much time in our day doing other things. We need that lead generation function to be effective and help us open up new conversations and new opportunities, which is important. And I think fundamentally, I don't think there's I think anyone has the capacity to become an SDR. I think sticking it out is another thing. It can be very, very challenging. I think it's a gruel. It is a grueling job, right? You're cold calling, you're emailing, you're trying to be active on social media. Effectively, you're constantly getting the door closed in your face. But at the same time, it can be equally rewarding. I think I'm still
recovering.
No, yeah. Recovering from the trauma. No, I was gonna say I'm actually still I'm still recovering. I'm actually still living off some of the money I made as an SDR. I have to drop that in there.
Yeah, of course.
But you know, it can be very, very rewarding, and I think you know people that become an SDR and do well and then progress into the account management role. I think their success of being an account manager or an account executive or a sales rep, whatever you want to call it, I think a lot of the grounding comes from the stuff that they've had to do as an SDR. So, yeah, I think, you know, we're obviously going to do some more series around, you know, actual specific content around that. But I think, you know, anyone that's definitely interested in getting into sales, an SDR is a great way to start.
Yeah.
And the trauma does go.
Eventually. It's trauma, but you get rewarded for it.
Exactly,
right? You know,
exactly.
Which is the main thing.
Exactly.
So with tech sales, I think, you
know, and because I know because I was an SDR for a good couple of years. You did it as well, right? Or did you?
I did. I was an SDR for a bit. Yeah, I was an SDR for a bit. So when I first left, obviously university, I had to kind of get a job straight away, and I knew I wanted to become or get into sales or biotech sales. So I had to get kind of a sales job, and the first sales job that I landed on was actually it was actually a lead generation role, which is prior to becoming an SDR. So lead generation is almost sending out white papers.
Okay.
So white papers are like basically email tools that you can send to your customer for them to understand what a business does or what your business does. And then once you have, and this is all technology based. So this can be anything to do with software, if I'm right, software, or it can also be sometimes hardware as well, because obviously tech can also include hardware, but usually it's software when it comes to SaaS sales or tech sales. So what I was doing was I was kind of phoning up loads of different companies. I had to make $130 per day.
Jesus.
Send out white papers and get a response. And once I had those responses from the company who wants to work with us, or like almost like an indication that they're interested, I would pass them on to the SDR. Then the SDR would do some more work on it and then pass it on to the account execs.
Oh, wow.
Which is what you are, basically. So it was quite an interesting journey. Then I eventually moved into the SDR role after about 5 months. So
how did you find that transition going from the earlier lead generation to SDR, where you're probably speaking to, from what you described, as speaking to people at a slightly warmer stage?
Sure, yeah.
How was that? How was that for you?
It was a lot better because I feel like when you're lead generation, you're most of the time you're getting that like hang-ups all the time, right? You make $130, literally 5 people will respond to you. So I feel like you're gonna have to have that kind of resilience to keep going.
The mentality, the mentality part is, you know, I would say that's half of the game. I had a really interesting way of thinking about it. So I didn't have to make as many calls, but I was doing about, I don't know, 90 calls a day.
Okay.
Because I was really good. So
cheeky.
So for me, I used to come into the office every day, and it's a slightly arrogant way of looking at it, but everyone that I was calling, I had the mindset of, you're not doing me a favor by taking a meeting. I'm actually adding value to you. I'm helping you in some way, shape, or form. So I almost had a bit of a view of, it would be, I'm perplexed that you would even want to hang up the phone, because what I'm saying is valuable, and you know it can make your life easier. But so I think you're gonna have to have a little bit of that mindset, a little bit of an ego. It doesn't have to be overtly in people's faces, but you need to internalize that you're very good at your job, without even having those credentials.
Yes.
And you know what you think in your mind effectively becomes, you know, your output, which I think is, you know, your reality.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because I learned so much being an SDR, because even small things like, you know, kind of sitting up, right, sitting up straight, you know, having the right kind of vocal tonality, being able to like kind of utilize pauses and so on and so forth. It kind of, you can leverage so much just off your voice to get someone to do something, and I think that's quite powerful.
Yeah.
just utilizing your voice to get someone else on the other line to actually do something. So I think
funny story I'll share. I think I must be the only SDR in history to come into the office in 3-piece suits every single day for
3-piece suits.
I was in a 3-piece suit for 2 years as an SDR, and I used to have other account executives say, "You're the only SDR we've ever seen that wears a 3-piece suit to cold call." Literally, other SDRs would be in trainers and jeans because effectively you're cold calling, sending emails. You're not having that face-to-face interaction. And I'd rock up in a different 3-piece. Like I did 2 3-piece suits.
Wow.
One grey one blue one. I'd have a tie. I'd wear a tie, and I'd have the pin thing that you put on the tie, and it kind of helped you get into that mentality, right? When I became an AE, it gave you the kind of the basic grounding of first impressions. They matter. Presenting yourself in the right way.
And when you was an SDR, what was you selling? Because I think that would give the people an indication of what tech sales actually is.
Yeah. So funny enough, my experience as an SDR, which was 10 years ago now, it was more on the hardware side.
Oh,
yeah, it was more on the hardware side. So I actually transitioned into software.
Okay.
So we were effectively a storage company, and organizations have gone through this thing of virtualization, which I won't go into it now, but those virtual machines sit on effectively a storage box. And we were providing that storage box that would ultimately sit in a data center. And those virtual machines would effectively be applications that they're running. So it has to sit on something, right?
Okay.
So we were providing that kind of infrastructure to support those applications. And our USP at the time was, by leveraging our storage boxes, you're giving your applications the fastest performance, which is effectively important for end users. And that's something that maybe they wouldn't have experienced on some other kind of competitors that we were working with. So yeah, it was a really interesting mix, because from there I went into the software component element of it,
of course,
and I went straight into an AE role from that. So it's a little bit of a different experience than other things. What you find is most people that start off in the hardware typically continue down that road, but I think software has become something that's so prominent now that majority of people go into that as a starting point, I think.
Okay. That's interesting.
So
I think tech is such a big space now, isn't it? I feel like it's such a buzzword now, tech. But when people think of tech, they kind of think of someone just sits in behind a computer coding the whole day, right?
Yep.
They don't realize that actually
someone's definitely doing that. Someone's definitely doing that.
Someone's definitely doing that, right? But there's also a whole component to it, right? Because once the code has been written and there's a software there that requires selling, you're the person who does that. And I think that's quite interesting that someone actually is out there doing that.
And I think the going back to the SDR topic, I think there's so many tech companies at the moment. I think there's so much opportunity for people that have come from, if you're slightly younger, you want to go into sales, or if you're a little bit older like us and you want to switch careers. It's still an option. I've seen 40, 50-year-olds as SDRs, and I think there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. I think they've made the decision that they want to change their career path, and I think they've realized that there is a big opportunity with sales. I would say my time as an SDR was probably the funnest time.
Okay.
Because you're in this corporate bubble. Everything's new, you're excited, you're speaking to people, not as much stress. So I think, for people that generally want to venture into the game, I think it's definitely a lot of exciting but rewarding couple of years they'd have for sure.
And as obviously we're on the topic of an SDR, how does one become an SDR? What's the, let's say I'm fresh out of university.
Yes.
I've got my degree in, I don't know, criminology.
Yeah.
and I've decided that I don't want to become a criminologist. You know, I want to make some money.
Yeah.
I've seen Jay just Porsche, and
It's gone now.
That's a story for another time.
Another story.
Yeah. And I kind of want to get into tech sales. Obviously the beginning stage is an SDR. So what do I do next?
You go to Nana&Jay's YouTube page, and we've got tons of content there. You can proceed to get, you can proceed to purchase some content. No, I'm kidding. So I think there's a couple of things that you can do, a couple of practical things that you can do. Spinning up a LinkedIn profile, making your presence known to the market. Working closely with recruiters. I think recruiters are a really great resource for you to leverage in the corporate game. I think similar with, sometimes sales can have a negative connotation. I think recruiters also get a bit of a bad stigma, attached to their names. But I think in reality, they open up doors to a lot of exciting organizations and ventures. So I would say kind of get a profile, get your CV ready, have your cover letter ready. The reality is at that stage, it's really hard to differentiate yourself. And it's important to, it's important to kind of have that confidence, and, speak about your successes, speak about your goals. And that would be where I'd start. And, find someone that's already in the game, right? They can give you a lot of perspective, open up doors, connections. And I think that's a lot of good stuff there.
Yeah, and I think to that point, actually, I think LinkedIn. I actually think that every single role I've had since university, I've got through LinkedIn.
Yeah,
literally every single role.
Yeah.
I think in this new world, digital age, I think social media, especially LinkedIn, is the best thing to utilize when you're getting into something like becoming an SDR.
And who told you to create a LinkedIn profile? Because it's actually part of my training in my first company. Yeah, it was actually part of the training course for us to create a profile. We had someone that actually created a profile with us. How did you?
I think a recruiter.
Yeah.
It must have been a recruiter.
Okay.
Yeah, it must have been a recruiter. I think there was a recruiter. I hope he's not watching this, but basically, he's a recruiter that got me to the job that I mentioned earlier on, which is the lead generation job at that company that I works for. And his intention was to train me up through lead generation to become an SDR, basically. So I decided that I wanted to take a different path completely.
Yeah.
Maybe now, I think if I was to do it back, I would have gone straight into tech. But obviously, I love biotech. I think it came more naturally to me because I did biomed. So obviously, I love what I do. But I think in terms of he taught me basically I need to create a LinkedIn profile. I need to make sure that my CV has my achievements and not just describing what I do on a day-to-day basis. So little things like that.
What's your number one? If you had to, it's a tough question. Number one advice you'd give to anyone that's come from the bottom set, started off in the bottom set, and wants to become an SDR. Number one advice you'd give them on being successful.
That is funny.
I'm never gonna allow you to forget that.
I know, literally. I should have kept that. You're gonna be walking around saying this to me.
And then I'll give my perspective from
high five.
And then I can give my perspective from set
literally.
one.
There you go. No, honestly, I think if anyone is in school, my advice would be, right, don't worry so much about exams and tests and stuff like that, right? Like, I mean, worry about it. Make sure you get good grades. But I feel like that's not the end or be all, especially in something like sales. Because I feel like sales, they reward you more for your abilities and application rather than whether or not you're able to pass an exam or not.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean?
Absolutely agree.
So I think for me, if you're, let's say, in college or something like that, or you're in school and you're watching this and you think to yourself, okay, I want to become an SDR. I want to get into tech sales. Make the decision from now on. And, and what I would do, right? What I would do if I was to go back then, I would start writing CVs, right? start writing fake CVs and just testing it. I'll put on the fake CV, I'll put on some experiences and test it out and send it to different companies. Even though you're not going to work for those companies, you're kind of seeing what works out there, right? Before you go out and get a degree, for example. So if you're thinking of getting a business degree, why don't you put a business degree on your CV, send it to some companies that you want to work for in the future and see what they respond to you.
Yeah.
If they respond favorably to you, then yeah, okay, cool, go for that degree. If not, then is that degree worth it? Because at the end of the day, you're doing that degree to get the job that you want.
Yeah.
So I would say start kind of identifying what you want earlier on. I know sometimes it's difficult. I think that there is a balance of try different things out and then see and funnel down to what you want to do. But I think you have a huge advantage if you understand what you want to do earlier on.
Yep.
And if it sells, then kind of focus on the things that's going to make you a successful SDR.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's what I would do if I was in the bottom set.
No, I'll stop referencing that. And no, I think you hit on some really good points there. And I think all of that is important. I guess maybe one of the things that I'd maybe add is just almost love to learn, because you're coming in effectively as a learn to be a bit of a sponge, right? Soak up as much information, as much knowledge and experience as you can, because the reality is, and it's not just as an SDR, all across sales, you will have ups, you will have downs. So it's important to have a very open mind to failing and learning from those mistakes. 100%. I think you will make you'll make a ton of them. I still make, 10 years later, I still make some very basic mistakes. So it's still kind of coming with that sort of almost a bit of a childish mentality of, happy to learn, excited to be here.
That's it.
And I think that will kind of put you on the right path for sure.
That's it. And I think that, we live in such a global world now, literally, I don't think I've reached out. There's only a few people that I've reached out to in LinkedIn that haven't messaged me back. If I see a role that I'm very much interested in from any company, if you message the person and you ask the person, I'm really interested in your role, I think you're great. I think this is what I want to do in the future. Could you guide me to get to the place of where you are now? Mate,
and that's exactly how you stand out, guys.
Literally, 7 out of 10 people will say yes to you because for one, it's flattering that someone respects what you're doing. And two, it's like you're being proactive.
Exactly.
There's very few people that can say no to that.
Yeah, and it's that proactivity that puts you, that gets you the opportunity, right? Because you've put yourself out there. You've been confident enough to reach out, and I think, I would completely agree with that. I think that kind of bullish enthusiasm, I think it can only help you. To be honest,
100%. So are there any? Because I know you mentioned LinkedIn and CVs and stuff like that.
Yeah,
to become an SDR.
Yeah.
Do you have any kind of other tricks?
Yeah, so I would.
Tips?
Yeah, I would definitely say so. LinkedIn, having a profile. Just to recap, work with recruiters. Great resource that you can leverage to kind of break into the industry. Mentality. We've spoken about how important it is to be disciplined and to understand that there will be losses as much as there's even more losses than wins sometimes. So it's it's being open to that, to those outcomes, I think is important. What else would I say? Finding a mentor, as you mentioned. I think that's important. Someone that can guide you and put you in the right, put you on the right course, put you in the right direction. I think that's hugely beneficial. I'm a bit of a nerd at heart, so I do a lot of reading sales methodologies.
Okay. And
I studied psychology at school, and I kind of like understanding how people think, why they do what they do, and how you can, I don't want to say manipulate, but influence some of the things that people do. So if you're interested and you're a nerd and you've got plenty of spare time, I would definitely recommend reading up on different sales methodologies. Medic, as it's commonly referred to, is my favorite. I've added a P there, so I call it MedPick.
Yeah.
And it's definitely a great methodology to learn.
So what is a sales methodology? Because obviously MedPick is one of them.
Yeah.
I'm guessing there's different ones.
Yeah.
So what does MedPick actually kind of stand for?
Yeah. So it's
just to give them an idea.
Yeah. So MedPick is a process of working effectively. So it's when you engage with a new buyer whether they're an existing customer or a new customer. It's effectively, it's a process that's effectively supposed to guide you to the close. So it's all about understanding, what's important to the buyer. Why are they even speaking to you right now? What does their process look like? Who else are they speaking to? It's all about, it's giving you a framework effectively to control the opportunity as best as you can. You're never going to be in fully control, but you can control certain parameters.
Sure.
And not even just MedPick, any sales methodology will help give you that framework. So yeah, that would be my advice.
Okay. Yeah.
Did you guys also have a because I know in the pharma world, do you also work with Medic or?
Yeah, no.
Okay.
I feel like with the biotech industry, it's very kind of different.
Yeah.
Every single company has its own sales methodology, but it kind of follows the same structure. They will call it different names, but I feel like the structure is always.
I think we should start our own sales structure, our own methodology.
Might as well start one, right? But yeah, no, I feel like the structure of sales will always be kind of the same. I think the most important point is that you have a part where you build rapport, you uncover the pain, and then obviously you close. They all have those three kind of basic elements into it.
Yeah.
But they will just be structured in different ways, and there will be different points in between where they will add or take things out.
And is there a requirement when you've worked at other, when you've worked at pharma companies, is there a requirement to be trained in a certain methodology? Because I see that a lot in my game, that there's an expectation that you're MedPick trained or you're another methodology trained.
Yeah.
Do you guys have that in similar thing in your game?
So in our kind of industry, we have sales trainers within each company, pretty much. So some smaller companies don't have that, so you might need to go to an external company to be trained on sales.
And those are internal people.
Sometimes they're external, but most of the time they're internal people that give you sales training, kind of a background training around sales, and then you would naturally fall into kind of learn about the product from an internal perspective, and then once you've done that for a couple of weeks, then you'd be out kind of on the field, basically.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
So it's kind of a short turnaround, but I think to kind of work for kind of bigger companies and so on and so forth, they do require that you've worked in other companies.
Okay.
Because biotech selling or pharma selling is kind of similar throughout different companies anyway. So once you've acquired that experience from one company, you're more kind of favorable from another company's perspective.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I know you've got some pretty impressive names on your CV for pharma companies.
Yeah. We won't talk about what they are quite yet, but yeah. I mean, if you think of some of the biggest companies, I mean, we've been able to get there, and that's just all through some of the tips and tricks that we'll be sharing in an upcoming course around how to kind of get into kind of the medical industry, because I think that there is a topic that's a little bit taboo. And it's quite interesting. I don't know how you feel about this, but and bear in mind, I don't think this is intentional from the companies I've worked for or anything like that. But I do think that in terms of representation, from people that share our reflection, it's not that it's not that explosive in the companies that we've worked for. And I think it's always something interesting that comes up. So this is one of the reasons why we decided to make this podcast, because I think it's to do with the fact that people just don't understand that these roles exist. That's a big thing, right? Because
I think that's probably the biggest thing.
It's the biggest thing.
It's kind of knowledge and exposure to this
exactly
stuff.
Right? Because if you don't know someone in tech sales, how are you supposed to know about tech sales? So I think that's one thing that I think this podcast is going to help with, which is kind of the exposure for people that kind of are looking at us and saying that, wow, like these guys look like me. These guys come from the same area as me. So that means I can do it too.
And I think that's that's a big driver for us. I think I speak for both of us on this, that people that come from minority backgrounds or backgrounds that hasn't necessarily been privileged, that don't necessarily get the same opportunities.
That's it.
It's we get asked constantly, how did you get into the game? What's some of the things that you did, and how can we leverage connections? And I think that's a big driver for us. We want to kind of help others, the next generation, kind of
That's
make
it.
that jump, and you know, hopefully in the next sort of 10, 20 years, you start to see more representation from,
That's it.
you know, some of those diverse backgrounds. So,
and the thing is, the crazy thing is,
so we're very philosophical, guys.
Yeah, we are.
Very philosophical.
I think therefore I am.
We're trying to save the world. That's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, literally. But no, I think it's it's a good thing, because I do think these companies, they want representation.
Yeah.
I mean, these companies now, they've understood that you know, having people from different backgrounds actually benefits the company as well.
It does.
There's commercial reasons why they want to do it as well. It's not just, oh, it's a nice you do. They also understand that people from diverse backgrounds adds to the neurodiversity of the company that they work for. And I think there was a study that was done. I forget where it was, but it actually showed that there's actually a benefit for the more diverse a company is. You know, both from a race perspective and also from a gender perspective as well. So I think, you know, this is something that's kind of I'm quite passionate about, and I think to be able to share this,
Huge.
It's going to be quite huge, you
Yeah.
know, and helping, like you mentioned, you know, people from a diverse background to get into these companies, and reap the benefits that we've also kind of, you know, been grateful enough to receive working for these companies as well.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
Hopefully I can buy myself a Porsche soon.
Yeah, you'll get there. You just keep working hard, you'll get there.
That's funny. So yeah, I think there was also a topic that we wanted to touch on, which was to do with so once you're in the interview process,
yes,
something like the tech sales, how do I impress? You know.
Yeah, so I think there's some basic things that you can do. I think, you know, you've got to understand you're going in one of many people, and it often is difficult to differentiate because you haven't done this before. You don't necessarily have the experience. You don't have any previous successes that you can speak about. So it's important to think outside of the box. And I don't think there's just one thing that relates to. I think you've got to kind of understand, you know, you got to kind of think, if I'm on the other person's shoes, what's really going to impress me? That's kind of the mentality that I give myself. But I think there's some basic things that you can do. You know, dress well, business smart, always, you know, present yourself as as someone that they'd want to be.
3-piece suit.
3-piece suit, guys. Go to TM Lewin, 3-piece suit. Bit of advertising there. So I think, you know, you can definitely, you know, it's definitely important to present yourself well. Understand who you're meeting and what's their expectation. Because the worst thing that you can do in any meeting is to be misaligned in terms of they're expecting A and you deliver B. So I always do a little bit of work. You know, I used to do a little bit of work and still do actually in any type of meeting or conversation, but understand beforehand what's their objective of the meeting, what are the topics to be discussed.
Sure.
Of course, do research about the company. I try and have established maybe 5 explosive facts that you can talk around that shows your curiosity in the organization. So things like, oh, you were founded in 2010. Don't say that. That's just a, you know, that's just a
too generic.
Yeah, it's too generic.
Yeah.
You know, maybe something like, you know, if the CEO founded the company because of a personal reason or a personal experience, something like that. It's not always easy to get, but something like that is quite important, because I think that shows you've really done some exciting research. And you've really thought about what you're saying versus just kind of listing off things that you've seen on the first page of the website. You know, speak to mentors. I know it's the similar kind of thing, but it really is universal, right? Who can you reach out to that can share some of their experience, give you some tips and tricks before going into that interview, and, you know, just be yourself, right? I think you know, you've got to be relaxed. You have to be confident. You know, I think as an SDR, I wasn't as good as I thought I was. I thought I was here, but I think in reality I think I was steps away from that. But I think one thing I was able to do was position myself as confident, willing to learn.
Okay.
And I think my personality did play a huge effect, you know, a huge piece of that. I think I was kind of very likable, quite funny. And yeah, I think people just warm to that. I see you're smiling there. So yeah, that would be my advice. What about yourself?
Yeah, no, I think I kind of second all those things. I think all those things are quite important. One thing that I've done that's always works well for me is that if you're going for a sales role, it's always impressive if you can sell them yourself by structuring it as a sales call.
Yeah.
So what I mean by that is, in an interview, you start off with an agenda, right? You set out what the agenda is going to be like. And that's exactly the same thing you do in a sales call. You set an agenda to the customer. This is what we're going to talk about. This is a result that I would like at the end. You kind of sell yourself in the same way. So you start off by kind of setting out an agenda. Sometimes, obviously, the interviewer will set out an agenda for you. Yeah. But it's always good to add your own piece to it because you're kind of indirectly telling them that you understand the sales process.
Absolutely.
And then whilst the interview is kind of happening, one thing that I always do is kind of the ABC method, always be closing. I'm always asking questions. Okay, cool. Is there anything that I've said that would hinder you from considering for the role, for example? But you just do it in a subtle way as the interview process is going ahead. And the interviewer, if he understands what you're doing, he will kind of smile. And he knows what you're doing. But the fact that you're doing it is something that's nice, especially when you're starting out. You might not do it perfectly, but I think they will appreciate the fact that you understand the structure of a sales call. And obviously at the end of the interview, always close the interviewer, right? Ask for feedback. I think that's something that a lot of people don't do. Do you have any reservations about, what I've kind of mentioned here today?
Yeah.
And I think that always sets kind of a powerful tone and it kind of flips the kind of conversation back to them, right?
Yeah.
And now they have to give you feedback straight away.
Yeah, it's a two-way thing as well, right?
Yeah.
It goes when you're in these interviews, it's you're trying to impress them, and that's probably the initial back and forth.
Of course.
But at some point, there is a power shift where it's now their job and responsibility to also sell why you should work for them.
Exactly.
Naturally, they've got competitors. They need to then position themselves as the right fit for you. And I think when they start to sell you is when you know you're in a very strong position.
That's it.
Because you've done the basics, the things that you've said. They've liked it, and then they start to sell their company, right? Why you'd be successful there.
Yeah.
And once you get into that point, I think that it's a great opportunity to close and understand the next steps.
And the thing is, we'll talk about more of these kind of interview methods in the course that we'll be releasing quite soon, guys. But yeah, even little things that it's just anything that makes you stand out. I remember when I used to do presentations. I think presentations is a big part of the interview process because you have to kind of do like a presentation to make sure that you can actually present. In biotech sales or pharma sales, you do what we call like kind of account planning, a six month plan of what you're going to execute whilst you're in the role. One thing that I always used to do that used to kind of make me stand out was I never used a PowerPoint presentation.
Okay.
I would use a different platform that no one else would use.
Ah, okay.
Right?
How comes?
Just stand out.
I like that. I like
stand
that.
Out. So I would use a platform called Prezi.
I am familiar with Prezi. Yeah, I like that.
I would use Prezi.
Okay, that's genius.
Yeah.
The first thing the first thing they realize is you're not using PowerPoint.
Exactly.
We've seen 5 PowerPoints.
Exactly.
And now automatically you're using a different platform.
Yeah.
That's straight away.
It's like
it's a differentiator.
It makes them sit up.
Yeah.
The presentation could be rubbish. Yeah. It could be, and I've done some rubbish presentations, but because I use Prezi, they're more like, oh wow, this guy
something different.
It's different. He stands out, and he went above and beyond. To do something kind of completely different to what we're used to.
I'm gonna use that in my next.
Every interview I'm gonna go to now is like Prezi.
Everyone's gonna be Prezi.
But I'm gonna flip back to PowerPoint.
I like that.
Yeah, no, it works really well for me. So I would say just anything that makes you stand out is something that's good to kind of do in the interview.
Yeah. And I think with interviews, it's kind of you really got to approach it as a you really kind of there's always a mental side of it. I think you always have to have that inner belief and confidence that you're the right candidate, that no one's better than you, and it's not arrogance, it's confidence that will help you and improve you. And I think you gotta you know, you kind of even if you're not there yet, you kind of got to think to yourself, you're the best person in the room.
Yeah. How do you develop that though? Like, what tips and tricks would you?
Yeah,
because it's quite an inner thing, isn't it?
Yeah,
How do you kind of convince yourself that you're the right person for the role if you've never done it?
Yeah, so I think it's important to understand where you're trying to get to, your objective, your goals. I always believed in my own ability without even having the results. I just was very confident that I was the best.
Yeah.
And I think it's something that I've developed over the years. I think I've always had that competitive edge. I used to play sports, not very good at it, not very good, but I used to play football when I was in school, and I think I just always kind of developed that competitive edge and confidence that I'm the best person here. So I think that's something that I think each person has to
kind of
discover on their own. But even if you've got to fake it, you got to position, you got to convince yourself in your mind that you're the best person, and over time you'll believe it, and you'll start to see the results from it, and then it goes from effectively kind of a blind ego to an ego based on
results,
results and success. And I think I think that's hugely hugely powerful.
and I really liked what you mentioned, because one thing that I had on my CV, and I think it was very much something that played in my favor, was having something competitive on my CV, because I do martial arts, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So I had that as competitive sports, BJJ or MMA on my thing.
Oh, I thought you were gonna. Sorry.
What?
I wasn't too sure where you're going with that.
Oh, no.
With that acronym, I wasn't too sure.
Just get out your mind and go out the gutter, man. BJJ stands for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, guys.
Okay,
right?
I just wanted to clear that out, guys.
Right, cool,
this is not an X-rated channel. It's a channel on content, sales content, guys.
Oh my God.
I don't want this going up on another website that it shouldn't be on.
There you go. Yeah, BJJ, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. That's what it stands for. Probably have to clarify that. But stuff like that, it doesn't have to be, competitive martial arts. It could just be that you play football, but having something competitive on there gives you that edge.
Absolutely.
As well,
completely agree.
It's good. Yeah. So I think the last topic we was going to talk about, in terms of, let's say you're in sales, how do you do a good job in tech?
Yep.
How do you kind of stand out? And, because obviously getting the job is one thing, right? But I feel like, and this is one thing I've noticed about sales, getting the job doesn't mean anything. It's maintaining that job for the next 6 months.
Yep.
That's where the test begins.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
The test actually begins in the first 6 months of actually getting the role.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't think that way. So how do you make yourself stand out in that first 6 months to really embed yourself in that company that you kind of...
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I think the first thing that I would look to do is put together a plan, commonly referred to as a 30, 60, 90-day plan. And it's usually used by account executives, but I think it's something that SDRs can also own. It's, what do I want to achieve over the next 90 days? One of the things I do quite early is when I join a company, it's sit down with stakeholders from each functions. Effectively, I like to see it as these functions are going to help me be successful. So I try and understand, I try and establish a relationship, build some rapport. Effectively, I'm going to have to go to these functions for help. And by having connections to each of these different business units, I think will help you as a seller. So I think that's important. And that's all incorporated as part of the 30, 60, 90-day plan. I think the obvious thing to do is, who's the best, who's doing really well, and go do what they do. I think one of my sales managers at the time, who's still a good friend of mine now, his advice to me was, there was an SDR that I used to sit next to, and he was really, really good. And his advice was, just to see what Connor's doing and copy it.
Yeah.
Do not reinvent the wheel.
Of course.
There's a reason why they're successful. Naturally over time you're going to implement your own process. But when you're really starting off, I think imitation's great, because if it works for them, there's no reason why it shouldn't work from you, you know.
I think there's a quote that says, good artists copy and great artists steal. So, you know,
exactly.
everything that you want to do is always be inventors. So just find the
Exactly.
person that's doing best and just basically copy.
And then you'll put your own spin and working practices to it. But you know, I definitely think copy to start with. There's a reason they're successful, and you know, you do what they're doing, and then you know, make it your own over time.
Yeah. Okay.
Would you add anything to that, or?
Yeah, I think just so I think, you know, when you start a company, I think it's very important to, like you mentioned earlier, also find a mentor who's within that company who's also doing very well.
Absolutely.
And get them. Usually, most companies, if they're good, they'll set you up with one anyway. But if they don't, find one, particularly one that is, you know, kind of connected to management as well, because that will make your life a lot easier. If you're being mentored by someone who has a connection to management, let's say if something's not going so well, you know, the mentor will understand what the issue is, and then they can kind of report that to management so that, you know, they're not kind of coming down at you too hard, because you're still learning, and the mentor can see that. So I think that's key. That's been really helpful for me. And I think what you mentioned, develop like a working plan of what you're doing in sales, especially if you work in, you know, the type of selling environment that I work in, and I'm pretty sure it's the same for you. A lot of the time you're working by yourself. You know, you don't really have a manager trying to check in on you all the time. So you have to really develop that idea that, look, even though someone's not watching over my shoulder, I'm still gonna get this done. So it's a bit of a developing that kind of self discipline, I would say, and setting yourself, you know, agendas to complete by a certain time. So let's say from 9 to 8. I mean, sorry, from 8 to 9, we're doing this certain thing. From 10 to 12, we're doing this. And then, you know, you block off some time as well, because people will try to put things in your calendar. You say, no, you know, I'm gonna be doing this because this is gonna generate the business which ultimately you want to happen. So I think that's how you kind of set yourself apart and become successful in that first 6 months.
Absolutely.
You know?
And is there any do nots that you'd suggest or recommend to anyone that's, you know, that's just started a new company as an SDR and wants to make a good impression? You know, anything not to overly indulge in? What would you say?
Any do nots? I would say just do not make bad impressions early on, because I feel like bad impressions stick. So for example, if let's say for the first let's say 2 weeks you were late to a call, for example, even if it's like 2 minutes late, it kind of becomes a reputation that you're the late guy. You know, and then it somehow follows you throughout the company. And it's horrible. I think if you're new as well, it's really important that you talk to someone about just little etiquettes, right? Because I remember when I was new and I had to do Zoom calls, I didn't know how to do Zoom calls. There's so many little things I didn't know how to do. I didn't realize that with Zoom calls, you know, you had to like put it on a table, wear a good suit. Mate, I was lying down on the bed during a Zoom call. Like, I don't know what was wrong with me, bro. Like, Maverick over here. Maverick, honestly. But it's just little things, you know, and maybe I was just being silly, but there's people out there that, you know, they just finished uni, they've not really been on a Zoom call, you know, so it's like just little etiquettes that I think, you know, you need to learn. And just being willing to make a very good impression. You know, it's very, very, very important.
I completely agree. I think first impressions last, and if you're known for being that guy, it's hard to shake that, that tag off, and you know, it will follow you. And I think, you know, it's all you know, the industry is not as big as people think. You know, people are often connected to different companies, different people.
That's it.
And you want to, everywhere that you go to, you want to have that, you know, level of professionalism. You know, you want people to be in awe of you when, you know, when your name's spoken about in rooms that you're not present in. So yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah. And I think to round it off, I think this has been a kind of a, you know, a really good conversation. I think this is the first of many. What we have coming up is we're gonna actually bring people from, you know, from tech and from pharma, maybe some recruiters, people who are in the game, to talk about it from a different perspective as well. And also we're creating courses around this topic as well.
Yeah.
We've actually created some topics which are free, which we'll be kind of posting out the link below as well, so that you can kind of indulge yourself in some of these conversations a lot more in bigger detail. And I think it will be quite useful.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and you know, guys, that's really our agenda on this, right? It's kind of imparting knowledge with other people that may not have had the exposure and opportunity to get into the game, and that's really what we're hoping to do. So yeah, that's I think I've enjoyed the conversation. I think it's we've touched on a few interesting topics.
Yeah.
The content that we'll be sharing that's free that Nana mentioned, it will be obviously more concise and more more structured. But it's always good to have these conversations and get other perspectives.
Yeah.
I think what's going to be interesting is bringing other professions onto the podcast and getting their viewpoint. Seeing if they agree with some of the things that we said. If they disagree with it, they're probably wrong, but let them have their experience and let them have their exposure. But no, jokes aside, I'm excited to see some of their perspectives and
definitely
and get some other ideas and
definitely. I'm really looking forward to kind of having like maybe hiring managers in companies onto this podcast.
Yeah.
And I think that would be a great conversation to have to see exactly what they're looking for as a candidate. But guys, if you have anything else in terms of the type of people that you want to see on the podcast, put it in the comment below, right? And we'll do our best to make sure we get these type of people on so we can kind of cater to everyone's needs in a sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, it has been good.
Yeah.
I'm glad you found out something about me, something new about me.
Yeah,
ages.
Yeah, the bottom set stuff. That's interesting, guys. No, so I enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to looking forward to the next one.
Perfect. All right, thank you guys.
Cheers, guys.
Yeah,
take care.